You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud, the cybercrime analytics leader. SpyCloud disrupts cybercrime by telling you what criminals know about your business and your customers, so you can take action to prevent ransomware, session hijacking, account takeover, and online fraud. SpyCloud constantly recaptures and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, including credentials, session cookies, and PII siphoned from malware-infected devices. With knowledge of the specific exposed data criminals have in hand from InfoStealer malware on managed and unmanaged devices, security teams can respond with a more efficient and effective process called post-infection remediation that fits seamlessly into existing incident response frameworks. Get SpyCloud's post-infection remediation guide outlining the 7 steps for preventing a malware infection from becoming a full-blown ransomware incident. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the season of success. It was the season of bankruptcy. It was the spring of launch. It was the winter of dissolution. Yes, you're listening to the correct podcast. 2 similar names, but 2 very different fates for Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic.
T-minus 20 seconds to LOS speed rest. Go for deploy.
Today is May 17th, 2023. I'm Maria Varmazis, and this is T-minus. Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic. The similarities end at the name. Arqit quits space. China adds a 56th Beidou satellite. Some updates from Sweden and Japan's respective space programs. And for today's interview, I'm speaking with Florida Today space editor Emre Kelly. Emre will be discussing the progress of Boeing's Starliner program with me. Stay with us. And here's your intel briefing for today. I got to get all Dickensian in today's show open, this tale of 2 virgins. Yeah. Though the company's names both start with Virgin, and that's thanks to initial funding from the billionaire Richard Branson, once these companies are off on their own, despite the similar sounding names, they also have nothing to do with each other. And right now, Virgin Orbit and Virgin Galactic are in pretty opposite places. So let's start with the state of Virgin Orbit. It's bankrupt, officially as of April, and it's in the process of selling off its assets. Today, the news is that Stratolaunch has made a deal to buy some of Virgin Orbit's assets, mostly its aircraft, including the Cosmic Girl carrier, to the tune of $17 million. Stratolaunch has been working rather famously on its own air-to-orbit launch vehicles, like the gargantuan Rock aircraft, so Cosmic Girl might find herself quite comfortable in a new home with them. That said, the deadline for all bids on Virgin Orbit assets is May 19th, so you don't have much time if you want to get in and snipe a bid all eBay style. And now over to Virgin Galactic, where things are going pretty darn well, actually. They announced today that they are a go for launch. The Unity 25 will launch to suborbital space with 4 crew aboard no earlier than May 25th from Spaceport America, New Mexico. And now this marks a happy return to space for Virgin Galactic, as the last such spaceflight was in 2021, so it's been a little while. This is the last check of the full spacefaring system, and if all goes well, Virgin Galactic plans to offer commercial spaceflight on a more frequent cadence starting next month. And we reported in yesterday's show that SES and Tesat are partnering to develop a system for ESA's Eagle-1 quantum encryption satellites. But it seems that not all of Europe sees the value in a satellite system. Space News is reporting that British cybersecurity software developer Arqit has hired a financial advisor to sell its space division. Arqit's space division assets include their quantum encryption satellite program. Space News also reported late last year that Arqit had scrapped plans for a space-based quantum encryption network, stating that they no longer needed satellites to deliver encryption keys and that they would instead be using a terrestrial system. Australian space and defense company Black Sky Aerospace has been approved to develop a site in southern Queensland to build and test rockets. State and local governments okayed the use of a 2,500-acre agricultural property to develop a rocket fuel facility and associated infrastructure. The news comes just weeks after the company announced that it had successfully produced ammonium perchlorate, a chemical that makes up about 70% of most rocket fuel. China has launched satellite number 56 for the Beidou navigation satellite system. This is the first Beidou satellite launched since summer 2020. China says the third generation of the Beidou navigation system is capable of millimeter-level accuracy and offers full global coverage for timing and navigation. The system is touted as an alternative to Russia's GLONASS, the European Galileo positioning system, and the US's GPS. The Swedish Space Corporation has been awarded a $2.46 million contract from the European Space Agency for the second phase of the optical communications project NODES. The NODES project, which stands for the Network of Optical Stations for Data Transfer to Earth from Space, is developing a direct-to-Earth data reception service based on free space optical communication. The Phase 2 contract will support the implementation, test, and demonstration of an optical network to be carried out over the next 2 years. And Japan's Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, has awarded 2 contracts to Warspace to study moon-to-Earth communications. The first of the 2 new study and development tasks will look at communications architecture between a lunar orbiting data relay satellite and the lunar surface. The second is the development of an ultra-sensitive sensor for satellite detection and tracking with the aim to achieve long-distance, high-speed optical communication between the moon and the Earth. And for some industry workforce news now, kinetic launch company Starliner has appointed Matthew Mejia as Chief Financial Officer and Chief Strategy Officer. Mejia will lead Starliner's fundraising efforts and accelerate the commercialization of their integrated tech stack that includes launch, satellites, and other services. Now, we all know the cliche, space is hard, and we must also add space is expensive. Even though the global economy is facing uncertainty, it doesn't stop the U.S. Department of Defense or NASA for calling for more money in their budgets. There is bipartisan support for a Space National Guard and for NASA's Artemis program, but the White House may not have enough to stretch to both in the coming fiscal years. Billions, that's with a B, billions are needed to help secure the skies and to launch the next humans to the moon. And both agencies are warning that Congress's inability to pass a timely budget has paused progress. And you can read all about budget requests for space and a lot more in the selected reading on our website, which is space.n2k.com. And that concludes our Intel briefing for today. But stay with me for my conversation with Florida Today space editor Emre Kelly as he walks us through Boeing's Starliner program. And hey, T-Minus crew, if you find this podcast useful, and I really hope you do, please do us a favor and share a 5-star rating and a short review in your favorite podcast app. It'll help other space professionals just like you to find the show and join the T-Minus crew. Thank you, and we really appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Palo Alto Networks, the leader in cybersecurity. As AI-driven attacks increase, organizations can't afford to have network security that's stuck in the past. Discover how Palo Alto Networks can help you predict what's coming and proactively secure against it with a zero-trust, AI-powered network security platform built to secure whatever, whenever, wherever. To learn more, visit paloaltonetworks.com/network security platform.
I went into the interview today with admittedly a bunch of preconceived ideas about Boeing's Starliner. And thanks to my guest, I found myself not only learning a lot, but also questioning a number of assumptions that I had held. From its ambitious mission to replace the shuttle program to the setbacks faced along the way, we delve into the challenges and triumphs of the Starliner. And that's all thanks to the perspective and expertise of my guest.
Going back to 2011 and the end of the space shuttle program, Starliner was ultimately one of two vehicles selected to replace the shuttle's ability to take astronauts to and from the International Space Station. Obviously, Boeing and Starliner was one of those, and SpaceX and its Crew Dragon capsule was the second one. So Boeing got the bigger share of that contract. Both companies continued working toward their first launch. Boeing's first uncrewed test flight for Starliner, so totally automated, autonomous test flight in December 2019, did not go according to plan. There were just some hardware issues, hardware and software, really, and it returned to Earth early. So had there been astronauts on board, it would have been fine, and it sounds like they would have been okay. But obviously, the mission was not a success. It didn't achieve the goals of easily reaching the ISS and returning home. So since then, a lot's been going on. After that demonstration flight, Boeing agreed essentially to try again out of their own pocket. They spent, I believe it was a couple $100 million to refly Starliner again on an autonomous mission to and from the ISS. That second attempt was successful. That went according to plan. So Boeing is now in a stage where they need to do a crewed flight test, or CFT. And obviously part of that is putting two astronauts on board for the first time, flying them to the ISS for a short stay. It's not going to be long, like a fully operational stay. Those are typically 6 months. And then those astronauts will return home and they will touch down in White Sands. A little bit hectic here and there, as you would expect with any new program, any new spacecraft. So most recently, Boeing and NASA, because again, NASA is the primary contractor for this. This is what they want. This is what they contracted Boeing to do. Boeing and NASA were targeting sometime in April for that crewed flight test. And they kind of came out recently and said, well, that's not going to happen. And it really came down to a delay. Boeing officials said it's not a traditional delay in the sense that they just kind of need to do more simulations. A lot of it has to do with parachutes. But at the end of the day, it is a delay. It simply is. It's now shifting from April to July, which is always a fun time of the year to fly. July is in Florida is lightning strikes every day and lots of rain. And rain has been a problem for Starliner. There was water intrusion during a previous launch attempt, and
oh, really?
So that needed to be worked out. And in Boeing's defense, if I remember that storm correctly, it was torrential. But obviously, spacecraft need to survive quite tough conditions. So Boeing's been working on that in the meantime, and they're now looking at July to launch those two astronauts to and from the ISS. But the good news is SpaceX is currently filling that crew capacity to and from the ISS. And once Boeing comes online, that'll be a redundant extra system if something were to happen on the other side, or if suddenly, the Russian Soyuz capsule is out of commission for some reason or anything like that, there will be two vehicles online, which will be good for the astronauts to have another way to get to and from.
I actually am surprised to hear that Boeing was the primary winner of the contract. Given how much SpaceX has been doing, for some reason, I thought it would be the other way around. Not that it's necessarily correlated, but that's just,
I believe Boeing's argument or discussion at the time when those were awarded, maybe I shouldn't say Boeing was the primary contractor, but they got more money. They got quite a bit more money. And Boeing's argument at the time was, well, we need to build a new capsule from scratch. SpaceX is going to base their Crew Dragon design on their previous Dragon design. So we need more money. that's kind of how that shook out. I think from a timing perspective, it's definitely a tough time for Boeing. The Starliner issues were happening at the same exact time the 737 MAX issues were happening. Obviously, these are two completely different branches of the company, two completely different teams. But of course, folks ask, and NASA was asking, are there cultural things? Is it something operational at Boeing? Is it this or is it that? But honestly, I think media overall, and I think the public overall, doesn't have enough transparency to be able to answer that with any degree of confidence. But at the end of the day, when their first uncrewed mission launched in 2019, you can look at it one of two ways. At the end of the day, that capsule did not reach the ISS due to hardware and software problems, but it did launch, it did get to orbit, and it did return to White Sands, New Mexico. And, it wasn't a lost vehicle. So obviously they made quite a bit of progress. And for a brand new vehicle, a brand new contract and building something mostly from scratch, it's tough. And the 2019 flight at least showed in some ways that there are some positives. And to Boeing's credit, as far as I'm aware, they paid out of pocket for the second test flight. So they, if you will, burned a little bit of that, any profit they would have made early on in that program.
If we're talking about Starliner, as you said, starting from scratch, then in a way that timetable is actually very fast. So if you frame it in that way, then things have been moving very quickly on their end, and they're just going through what makes sense for testing for something that's that compressive a timeline, I suppose. So,
yeah. I mean, everything these days seems to be operating on a faster timeline. Maybe that's just our sort of human perception of it, but we want things now, and we want them faster. Being able to get a new iPhone every September is very different from launching, certifying, flying properly a new spacecraft. And one of the big things officials at NASA, Boeing, SpaceX, pretty much wherever you go, talk about a lot is a lot of folks who are doing this are doing it for the first time. People who did this during Apollo aren't exactly like, it's been so long since Apollo and Gemini and Mercury. These folks aren't like working at SpaceX or Boeing and holding the hands of the younger people and showing them this stuff. A lot of this stuff for a lot of these people, it's a brand new thing.
what a great point. So the talent also has to sort of scale up as we go. So hopefully that is something that we'll see ramping as things progress. But in the meantime, we will keep an eye on what's going on with Boeing and Starliner. Emre, thank you so much for walking me through it. I really appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure.
And we'll be right back.
Now, a word from our sponsor, the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, currently seeking qualified applicants for its innovative Master of Science in Security Informatics degree program. Study alongside world-class interdisciplinary experts and gain unparalleled educational, research, and professional experience in information security and assurance. Interested U.S. citizens should consider the National Science Foundation's CyberCore Scholarship for Service program, which covers tuition and a $6,000 annual professional development allowance, as well as providing a $37,000 additional annual stipend. Apply for the scholarship and the fall semester by March 1st. Learn more at cs.jhu.edu/MSSI.
Welcome back. Now, crowdsourcing efforts to further scientific understanding have a long tradition. For example, a little history lesson here. Women like Williamina Fleming, Antonia Maury, Annie Jump Cannon, Anna Winlock, Henrietta Leavitt, and Florence Cushman, amongst many others, were part of a group of women called the Harvard Computers, and they pored over reams of astronomical data in the late 1800s to early 1900s. Their work studying and cataloging stars contributed significantly to how we understand and classify stars to this day. And once the word computer came to mean a machine and not a person, we even crowdsourced computing power, if anyone remembers SETI at home in the late 90s. And right now, at least until AI proves me wrong, humans are still the best at detecting patterns and anomalies and spotting things that maybe are where they shouldn't be. And there are a lot of citizen scientist programs out there right now that need your help to look through the astronomical data that's out there. And one of them, well, you can help defend Earth from a potentially hazardous near-Earth object. Kinda. The Catalina Sky Survey, based out of the University of Arizona, looks for near-Earth asteroids nightly, but it can't go through all the data it collects. So it needs you to help look through its images to see if the detections that they've made are real possible asteroids or just false alarms. The project launched yesterday, and so far, 828 volunteers have already classified over 34,000 images. And new images are uploaded daily for citizen scientists to look at, so no need to rush and call dibs. There's plenty of space for everybody. And that's it for T- for May 17th, 2023. For additional resources from today's report, check out our show notes at space.n2k.com. We'd love to know what you think of our podcast. You can always email us at space@n2k.com or submit the survey in our show notes. Your feedback ensures that we deliver the information that keeps you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. This episode was produced by Alice Carruth, mixing by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music and sound design by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Brandon Karpf. Our chief intelligence officer is Eric Tillman. And I'm Maria Varmazis. Thanks for listening.
T-.